Welcome everybody to the new episode of the Food for Thought series. My name is Santi Furnari. I'm Professor of Strategy at the Business School, formerly known as CAS, at City University of London. It's a great pleasure to welcome you to our new episodes, Books Are Dead, Long Live Books. And as you know, this is episode number 20 of a long series of events, and more will come soon until December. And these are just a preview of the next three on October 21st, October 28th, and November 4th. And the series will continue till early December, December 9. So you're welcome, and we're sure you will join also other episodes. As I said, welcome. And today we will actually discuss an interesting, what we find an interesting topics, which is the future of management books. And particularly we will mull over a few questions. Are management books dead? Are they the present, the past, or the future of management thinking? And what place do management books have in a digital era of bite-sized tweets and fast reading? You know, can management books still influence policy, management practice, and management thinking more broadly? To actually have a debate on such topics, we will follow our usual food for thought format, which has been successful so far, and we're sure will be today as well, which means that I, as a host, will interview a special guest for about 15-20 minutes, depending on how the conversation goes, and we will then open the floor, the virtual space, better to say, for question and answers from you, from the audience. And to make questions as in the other Food for Thought episodes, please use the Q&A function. So this box that you see with written Q&A, please don't use the chat. The chat is to communicate with each other, but use the Q&A to type your questions, and feel free to type your questions as they come along. So while I'm interviewing our special guest, feel free to type them, and I will pick up your questions once we will be done with the interview. We couldn't have actually a better guest to discuss the future of management books than an award-winning author like our guest today, who is Dr. Daniel Beunza, Associate Professor of Management at the Business School, formerly known as CAS, and member of the Center for Charity Effectiveness. Dr. Beunza, as I said, is also the author of a multi-awarded management book titled Taking the Floor, Models, Morals, and Management in a trading room, in a Wall Street trading room, and which not only received a lot of media attention from prestigious outlets like the Financial Times, but also received two of the most prestigious academic awards that a book can ever receive, namely the Terry Award from the Academy of Management in 2020, this year, and again this year the Best Book Award from the European Group of Organization Studies, EGOS, the major conference in organization studies in Europe. Just to use a football analogy, this is the academic equivalent of winning simultaneously in the same year the World Cup series and the European Cup series. So it's an amazing and unique achievement. Well done, Danielle, to you, and well deserved. So I don't know about you, but I'm quite eager to ask what's behind the scenes of this great success, and you know, what makes books succeed, especially in this digital era. And what's the story behind this sensational success in the era of bite-sized tweets? So before digging into this, I just want to say a few more words about Dr. Beunza, for those of you who don't know him. Danielle is an ethnographer and sociologist by training, and an expert of ethnographic methods. Those fly-on-the-wall techniques and methodologies that researchers and scholars use to observe at a close distance what managers do in practice every day in their organizations. And those are exactly the same methods that Danielle used and followed to observe the everyday practices of managers and traders in the Wall Street trading room that is at the center of his book. He's also, beyond numerous academic articles that Daniel actually has published using these ethnographic methods, he's also the founder of an academic blog that's now become very popular called the Socializing Finance. And generally, Daniel is widely acknowledged and considered a pioneer of a sociological approach to banking, finance, and markets more in general. So I all invite you to check out his work if you haven't done so, which I suspect you have done already. But just to set the context of our debate about the future of management books, I think one way I'd like to start is really asking the author of the book to tell us a little bit more about the gist of the book and its message. Would you like, Daniel, to tell us a little bit more about the gist of your book?
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Santi, for this kind introduction. And in short, so my book, Taking the Floor, it's ultimately the story of a manager. And so this is the manager of a trading room that is unsatisfied with the what he perceives to be ethical shortcomings in derivatives trading. And so he decides to go out, take a chance, and completely restructure the trading floor that he is running. And so what the book does is it tells the story of this, so to speak, experiment. So what worked, what didn't work, what actually was the experiment that was undertaken. And then on the basis of these findings, then it draws implications for the ongoing debate as to how to organize the financial sector, the City of London, Wall Street, which is a debate that began in the aftermath of the 2008 global financial crisis, and that it is by no means finished. So that, I would say, in a nutshell, is what the book is about.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And I think what's remarkable is that your book is about a very fine piece of research that is rigorous and methodologically very well executed. And so has its own complexity and nuanced argument. And still the book has received broad media attention and many awards. So I think a broader question here that I'd like to ask you is, why and how do you think the books can still have this enduring allure, right, on the media and on the public, and how they can get this attention? Would you like to share your experiences about this?
Well, I think that there's, I guess, two answers to that. One answer is that when it comes to the sheer pleasure of reading and just enjoying a set of ideas that are presented in a written form, it really is difficult to beat what a book can do. And so when I picture myself enjoying a fine piece of reading, inevitably what I have in my mind, and I'm sure that many of the people in the audience feel the same way, is just me holding a book or a Kindle and just diving into a long read. So I would say that that's one element of it. The other element is that the book perhaps somehow has captured people's imagination in that it says something about the present time. So the title of the book, Taking the Floor, it's a play on words. It means both seizing control of a trading floor, but it also refers to the act of formally rising to speak to an assembly, so like a legislature. And so what the book is trying to argue is that in seizing control of this trading floor, what the protagonist of the book, this manager, did was to actually take his own initiative and then do something about a domain that he perceived to be flawed and in need of reform. And so as we find ourselves in the midst of a situation with rising inequality, totalitarian drift, and this high complexity of contemporary societies, here we have somebody who is in the midst of a highly complex sector, derivatives trading, who nevertheless decided to go with his gut and try something out. And so I think that the book, speaks to that need for all of us to find some active way to do something.
Thanks. That's actually very interesting. It makes me think also, how can you do that in writing as an author? And one thing I noticed, and I think many of the audience will probably also notice of your book, is structure as it is an academic book, but it's structured almost as a novel, in the sense that there are main characters, there is a plot, chapters are divided depending on who the characters are, and you're referring yourself to the main character, Bob, the manager, and you almost bring us in the journey with them and feel almost emotionally their experience in the complex decision-making dilemmas that they had in front of them. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about this plot-based structure, for lack of a better word? Can this plot-based structure be useful for academic books more in general, for management books, and maybe to get attention, or generally? And also, how did you came up with it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question, because it's one of the main ways in which I departed from dominant practice in academic books, certainly academic books in management. So it really came out of a couple of things. One is my own, I decided to take a risk, and I decided to write the book that I would have liked to read. And so do not write something that I think is what somebody else may be wanting to read, but rather go with what I would like to read myself. And so in that respect, I began to write the book without the structure that it currently has. It was sort of like based on topics. Each chapter spoke to a different topic. And then one day I realized that the book was becoming a little bit dry. And specifically that it was less interesting and compelling than reading back my notes from 2002, 2001, the actual ethnographic field notes that I have taken. So I eventually realized what the problem was. The problem was that when I read one of my notes, I didn't know, when I was beginning to read the actual notes, how that visit would end. It was the mystery about not knowing what the end is looking like. However, when I read the chapters that I had written, which were nicely arranged around themes with a nice introduction that framed and said, this is what this chapter is going to say, I realized that somehow it was less interesting and less compelling. And then I understood that oftentimes what makes life interesting is that you don't know the end. You don't know how things are going to play out. And that this is a great resource to bring into a book, even if it is an academic book, because what you're doing then is you are helping the reader stay motivated and interested.
Thanks, Daniel. And I think there is a broader message here, if I may reflect on your words, which is the power of stories, right? And how academics can be not only rigorously based but in data and in methods, but also great storytellers, right? So the two things should not be necessarily at odds, right? It's not a trade-off necessarily. I'm gonna just deviate from our format, because I think there is an interesting question from the audience that speaks directly to this issue and would be interesting to take right now. It speaks really to the structure. Can you share with us your experience of writing a book, comparing with writing a journal article, particularly the benefits and drawbacks of writing books as opposed to journal articles in today's environment?
So I would say that both articles and books have their own distinct advantages. The key advantage of the article is that it fits with the peer review system, which is what social sciences now are based on. And so it is all based on the evaluation of colleagues, whether it's the editor, the reviewers. And so journals just generally help advance the peer-based social science. With books, the advantage that you have is that you can connect straight to your audience. It's almost like speaking to them directly. And so for that reason, it's also that sometimes books are so much more enjoyable to read. So I would say that the two are complementary. My book was based on 4 previously published articles. And so in a way, I draw upon the benefits of that peer review. But there are other formats in which people write books that have not been yet written about in articles.
Thanks, Daniel. That's very useful, I'm sure, for many, including myself, who are here aspiring book authors. And so related to this, a question that is perhaps very relevant to many aspiring book authors is, how do you figure out who your audience is? And can you tell us a little bit more about your experience about the process?
So the writers of academic books are always asked to think of graduate students as their ideal intended audience. So you're writing for somebody who's smart and sophisticated, but not necessarily a narrow expert. I guess in my case, I was working with myself as the audience. I was trying to do something that would bring out my own self-expression. And then the actual audience, then that becomes a process of discovery and almost self-discovery once the book is out. So what I have found out is that the book doesn't quite fit into the canon of traditional anthropology, doesn't cite the traditional sort of classic in anthropology, doesn't quite fit into many of the other books that write about economic sociology. And at the end of the day, the book is an account of an attempt to elucidate a bunch of questions about a manager and the company that this manager is running. So eventually, I discovered that the audience of my book is management academics, people interested in management, and people interested in the importance of the figure of the manager, which is something that I believe this year will be the theme of the Academy of Management meeting. So going back to the idea of just what a single good manager can accomplish.
Yeah, thank you. That's great, and I think it speaks to the process that many of us are going through, and it is a journey. Especially as you talk about it, it's clear that you went through a process of discovery, right? So one of the things that I think many aspiring book authors sometimes wonder about is where to start. And particularly, there are practicalities involved with this, like contacting the book publishers, figuring out who the right book publishers are. I mean, we can talk also more about what happens towards the end, right, when the book gets published afterwards. But how did you go about the process of contacting the right book publishers? Your book has been published by Princeton University Press, which is one of the major, if not the major, academic book publisher. Can you share a little bit more of your experience about that?
Yeah, so that's a very interesting process. I'd say it was about back in 2006 that my first 2 papers on this topic were already published. They were readable academic papers, which is already something. I began to be contacted by various publishers. And I think that what publishers were beginning to realize is that the economy was being financialized. And so this is a story that needed to be told to a broader audience beyond finance academics. But then what I did is I reached out to Eric Schwartz, who at the time was the sociology and cognitive science editor at Princeton University Press. And we got together. I remember a wonderful first coffee that we had in a cafe in Grand Central Station in Manhattan. And there was a meeting of the minds. We clicked. And so from then on, he was just a champion of the book. And so as the book project goes pushed and pushed further in time to fit my own career requirements and other projects, papers, Eric was always a huge support. And so what I would say is the bottom line, I think, for other potential authors is that it's really helpful if you have that sort of like click with your editor. If the click is not there, then when you face the need to send, I don't know, the first draft of 5 chapters, it's just going to be really quite scary. So yeah, I think that one wants to look for that personal connection.
That's great, and you point to a process that it sounds very different from the process of review to publish articles. Going back to a previous question asked for one of the audience members, you don't have necessarily that sort of anonymity and letters, but actually you meet in person with editors. And so it's a much more human element to that and in person. That's very interesting to hear. It also sounds, by just looking at your social media presence and the feeds on your LinkedIn account and Twitter account, you're also being invited by many institutions to discuss your book, and in a series of virtual and before COVID also physical events. Can you tell us a little bit more about what happens after a book is published, and how is important that book promotion process? How is that important? How important that is to get the attention that a book deserves in a, as we say, digital era of bite-sized tweets?
Yeah, so I'd say this is a really important topic for authors, because the paradox of us living in a digital era of tweeting and social media is that it makes books all the more relevant, and it makes it even easier for authors to communicate the excitement about whatever is in the book. So in my case, my book came out almost exactly a year ago, on September 3rd, 2019. And, I wasn't clear about what would happen on that day, but the book came out. I got the email that you could now order it on Amazon, but somehow nothing quite happened. And so I realized that, gosh, the only impact that this book is going to have depends on people reacting to it. So I need to reach out and communicate why this book is important and exciting. And so I, fearful that my book might sort of like disappear in the food, I ended up devoting a wonderful bunch of time and attention to tell the story of the book on social media. And lo and behold, soon enough, people began to react to it. And it is a wonderful process of really reaching out to people with the book as a reason, but in a way that somehow it became just rewarding by itself.
So it takes on a life on its own, right, in many ways, but it is so important, as you say, being proactive about it, which I think is an important message for academic authors, right, of management books. Sometimes also with articles, we get used to just publish and then leave it there, right? So this is perhaps a good moment to invite further questions from our audience. And so feel free to just put your questions in the Q&A chat, and I will read them aloud. I see more questions are coming. The question before, by the way, was by Alessandro Tirapani. Thank you, Alessandro. Another question from Simone Friani. How much of your prior theories and literatures did you carry with you as you were writing, as opposed of letting your naked notes speak by themselves? And how did you go about deciding on this fine balance between your story and prior stories? So about the balance of academic literatures, right, versus what emerges more from your data and field notes as an ethnographer.
Yeah, so it's true that lots of people see this as a dilemma, but I think it's a false dilemma. I think that the only academic relevance of any finding, any event that you describe in a book lies in its relationship to the literature. So whereas many academic books, they keep the theory in the first and the last chapter, I made a very conscious choice that my theory was going to intersperse each and every section of the book. So each of the chapters begins with a theoretical discussion, and following each of my visits, as I describe, to the trading floor, I then describe my own theoretical interpretation of it. And far from making it boring or dry, my own perspective is that by sharing with the reader why I thought that was so important and interesting, then it makes it easier for the reader to connect with that.
Interesting, but I suppose that process of knitting tied together theories and dilemmas is quite is remarkable. It takes time also in terms on how you then figure out and go through the notes, your field notes and observations. And one of the things that stuck with me reading your book is indeed that each chapter could be simultaneously is part of a whole, but speaks to a crucial dilemma in terms of decision makers. So just as a comment, I think that speaks to the fact that the book speaks so prominently to managers and to what they do and bankers. Daniel, you have been talking about book promotion and somehow the surprise and how the books take on a life of its own. I'm curious about the impact of COVID on book promotion and any surprises you actually encountered after COVID hit. This is, of course, a huge topic for book publishers and book authors. So what is the surprise you about this process of book promotion after COVID hit?
It was a huge learning experience. On the very day that the lockdown in London was decreed, I was scheduled to go in person to the BBC for appearing in the Thinking Aloud program in Radio 4. And I wasn't able to do it because it was obviously once the lockdown was in place, you couldn't do it. So to me, it was incredibly frustrating. And I thought that, I was about to give up on continuing my book promotion. But then what happened was I decided to shift to a different project that I was conducting with there in Kent on 9/11 and what do we learn from 9/11 about COVID recovery. And then soon enough, I realized that actually the analysis in my book speaks to the dilemmas about remote work and working from home and how to combine the workplace and technology. And so soon enough, I found that, again, promotion was possible, but now in a different context of relating my findings to the new thing that was happening, which is COVID. So I guess the bottom line and my own surprise was that a book author who is trying to engage with the broader society out there has to constantly be finding ways of relating the message of the book to ongoing events. And when this is done correctly, it's a wonderful exercise in finding the relevance of one's own ideas for the world out there.
Thanks, Daniel. That's very interesting. A book, in a way, doesn't end when it's published. Not at all. It actually continues. It's a process, an event, right? That you carry on with you is a journey. And so I think this is a very powerful message for our audience here. I now am gonna, just in the remaining time, there is one more question that I wanna take before I ask Fabrizio. One of the conclusions of your book is the theory of proximity control. How has it been welcomed by managers in the field?
So actually, it's had a surprisingly warm reception. And I have to say that one of the things that has made me most proud is that one of the alums from CAS reached out to me. He's somebody who works for a software company, Equal Experts, and suggested that we collaborate in putting together an app that allows companies to do better remote work on the basis of the theories put forth in the book. So that was a very welcome development.
Well, that's great to hear. And for the many CAS alumni who are connected now, that's, I mean, you're welcome to contact Danielle further. And, these are powerful connections that can happen. Just in closing, I have a curiosities. I mean, Gillian Tedd, the Financial Times editor and journalist, she actually had a piece on you, Danielle, and she wrote, I quote, "Perhaps it is time for Beunza to do another fly-on-the-wall study. This time in pool houses, mountain huts, and home offices, given the relevance of home offices now. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about your future as a book author and whether you are actually getting prepared to study and doing ethnography work on pool houses, mountain huts, and home offices?"
That's a wonderful comment, Santi. Jillian Ted has been in touch. She is now currently working on a book about the power of anthropology and the power of ethnography, and she's been very kind. She is going to include parts of a chapter on my book, Taking the Floor. I think that I can reveal this at this point. And so I'm just really happy that an author that to me has been somebody that I admire and that I read and followed in the Financial Times suddenly is now picking on my work and picking up on the work and building on it.
Thanks, Daniel. I guess what we can gather from all this is that not only books are not dead, but they are actually alive and kicking. And the book authors like you actually allow books to be alive and kicking. So congratulations. Is there any last final message that you would like to say to aspiring book authors who are watching us today?
By all means, I would say that please go ahead and do that book that you have in you, but only do it if you are willing to change yourself. If you're not ready to evolve and see yourself change as the book is done and then is published, then be careful because the book will change you.
Thanks. That's a great way of summarizing and a powerful message for us to take away. I guess we've been serving great food for thought today, very yummy. Thanks, Dr. Daniel Beunza, for really inspiring us with these stories and insights from your book. And thank you all for joining us today. I think these all really broaden our perspective as academics, but generally as readers of management books and thinking about the future of those books. Thanks all for joining, and looking forward to seeing you and entertaining your questions on the next Food for Thought episodes.
Many thanks. Thank you.